Honorable Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Dominica, Dr. Roosevelt Skerrit, other ministers of government gathered here this morning, Most Reverend Gabriel Malzer, Bishop of Roseau, Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Lennox Linton, and other opposition parliamentarians, Dr. Didicus Jules of CARICOM, Your Excellency, Mr. Steve Farrell, Permanent Secretaries, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen of the head table, Financial Secretary, Mrs. Rosamond Edwards, Reverend Charles Martin, heads of institutions, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the media, good morning. Dowasco is pleased to be here this morning to present to you and to the nation its position as regards to recovery post-Hurricane Maria and its intention going forward. The Dominica Water and Sewage Company Limited, Dowasco, as you are aware, is a wholly owned government company. Dowasco operates 42 water area networks, and prior to Hurricane Maria, supplied 98.5% of the population of Dominica, which represents over 22,000 water service connections. Production, by and large, is approximately 10 million gallons of water per day that is produced and distributed throughout Dominica. In addition to provision of potable water, Dowasco also provides sewage services and operates 3 centralized sewage systems for the city of Roseau and environs, the main one, in Jimmet and in Canefield. The damage to the water infrastructure following Hurricane Maria was tremendous. All 42 systems were adversely impacted by the hurricane, with damages of varying degrees, summarized as follows. We had damage in water sector, widespread in most of the areas, damage occurring to transmission and abstraction infrastructure, abstraction facilities located in rivers and as such very vulnerable to the impacts of flash flooding, the changing course of many rivers, diverting them away from the intake structures, and several miles of pipelines exposed and undermined in several areas. Access routes to intakes and storage facilities, as well as pipe routes, were completely washed away, such as on the West Coast, water system significantly in Coolibistry, Wesley, Woodford Hill, and Margot system, Pishley and Granby, Pebush and Bagatelle systems. Many of these systems had been temporarily restored post-Tropical Storm Maria and were pending new projects upgrade, including the Coolibistry system, in which we had just spent in excess of $1 million to restore the access road leading to the intake. We had blocked and damaged access roads due to fallen trees and landslides, broken pipelines across bridge crossings, and blockages at intakes with large boulders and trees, high levels of siltation from land slippage and soil erosion. I do have a few pictures which you cannot see now, so I'll just go through the presentation. We had broken pipelines and several lengths of those lines completely destroyed and swept downstream across the island. Several thousands of feet of supply and distribution lines ranging from 2 inches to 12 inches diameter ductile iron, high-density polyethylene, galvanized steel, and PVC pipes, they were all destroyed, irrespective of the construction material used for those pipes. They were all destroyed. The new Coolibistry intake on the West Coast, which was just restored, as I indicated, prior to or post-Hurricane Maria, Tropical Storm Erica, was again destroyed following Hurricane Maria, and it is something that is under consideration as to what should be done. Should we replace it, or should we seek alternative means of supplying water to that community? In addition to the water sector, there was significant damage also to the sewage infrastructure. We had damages near the Dominica China Friendship Bridge, damages on the Baffested Bridge, and the recently installed Ems Hall suspended river crossing, which took sewage from the apartment buildings across the river to the sewage system. Extensive damage to the sewage manholes in Ruzu, and siltation of sewer manholes and lines throughout the city of Ruzu. Siltation of the wet well at Betong Sewage Treatment Plant, and extensive damage to the electrical control panels for the wet wells at the Betong Treatment Facility. Ladies and gentlemen, damage to the sewage infrastructure has been extensive, and in spite of Dowasco spending in excess of $1 million to restore the sewage system in Ruzu following Tropical Storm Maria, that cost is expected to be even greater following Hurricane Maria. Temporary measures taken to restore water following Hurricane Maria. We had installed a number of mobile filtration units, storage bladders, and distribution bags with the assistance of various aid agencies such as UNICEF, the Red Cross, Samaritan's Purse, Israel Aid, and the Belgians. We engage extensively in water trucking and with the assistance of other agencies. And of course, we also constructed a number of temporary intakes to replace those destroyed or significantly damaged by the hurricane. Temporary restoration of supply pipelines using flexible high-density polyethylene pipes in places where we had the rigid ductile iron pipes, which are scheduled to last almost 100 years. The status of water supply as we speak, there is now full restoration of 32 out of 42 water systems, partial restoration to 5 out of the 42 water areas, and restoration pending to 5 out of the 42 water areas. Water service is now fully restored to approximately 90% of the customers nationally at a cost of just over $13 million, either spent or committed to date on recovery and rehabilitation efforts. In addition to the funds spent on recovery and rehabilitation, Dowasco has lost to date in excess of 4.1 million EC dollars in lost revenue. Progress and recovery efforts, we saw major rehabilitation works undertaken to date in several water systems, such as Water Area 1, which is the main water system that serves communities from Meru to Castle Comfort, to Salisbury, to Collyhoo, Benz, Wesley, Woodford, and Marigot, where water has been fully restored, Cassie Bruce, Granby in part, Bagatelle, Girondale, which was fully restored, but due to generator issues, has been having some challenges there. We do expect the parts to arrive today, and the generators will be replaced and continue pumping there. Wharton Waven, which recently came on stream last week. And of course, we had to engage in clearing of a number of intakes. Work in progress in the areas of Paybush, Soufriere, Scotshead, in Pishley, Coolibistry, and Beaubois. Dowasco suffered tremendously from loss of electric power from Dominic's grid, from the national grid, and as a result had to procure 17 generators to pump water to areas where we had no pumping stations in the past. It means a tremendous increase in cost for Dowasco, having to procure those generators. Thanks to a couple of funding agencies, we were able to get some of the generators free, and of course the government of Dominica. And some of these areas include Castaways, Cuba Road, Lower Warner, Upper Warner, Good Hope, Mopo, Pilit Soufriere. Mopo and Pilit Soufriere generators will be fully commissioned later today. In Tetmon, Campbell, and Soufriere. Gomme, Dalis, Gallio, Savan, Scotshead, Bellevue, 2 areas there, and of course in Mopac and Paybush. plans towards realizing climate resilience in our water system. The government of Dominica has earmarked funds provided by the UK government, Department for International Development, DFID, for technical assistance and capital works in the water sectors in Dominica. The Caribbean Development Bank, CDB, is providing management support in this regard. A technical advisor will be recruited shortly to prepare terms of reference for the various consultancies to be undertaken to determine the relevant interventions necessary to build the required resilience in the water sector. Infrastructure projects will follow based on the outcome of the consultancies, and the recommended interventions could begin as early as January 2019. Among the measures required are early warning systems. With funding and technical support from the World Bank under the Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project, DVRP, Dowasco, along with other key stakeholder agencies, such as the Forestry and the Met Services, has embarked on a project to install hydromet stations for stream flow and rainfall measurements at strategic locations throughout Dominica. Also, under the third water supply project, funded by the CDB and the government of Dominica, Dowasco is procuring a supervisory control and data acquisition SCADA system that will allow remote monitoring of the water supply system, starting with Water Area 1 network. New bulk meters and system control valves and gauges will be used to relay information such as flow rates, pressures, and water levels in reservoirs in real time, so that decisions can be made in more appropriate time. Dowasco, also with grant assistance from the Caribbean Development Bank, is undertaking a strategic climate vulnerability assessment, SCVA, of its operations and physical infrastructure in order to develop an action plan and investment portfolio to improve climate resilience. This activity is expected to begin in March 2018, and the expected completion date is the end of August 2018. The action plan developed is expected to influence the strategic management of Dowasco's operations and inform the design and construction of new projects. The objective is to build institutional capacity and improve sustainability and a more climate resilient infrastructure with risk-based asset management techniques incorporated. Lessons learned and new approaches. Some of the climate resilience techniques will include backup generators required for each pumping station. Dowasco at the moment utilizes mainly gravity-fed systems, but we recognize the need to have backup generators at each pumping station so that when the grid fails, we can move to those generators and ensure that people have water at their homes in quick time. As transmission lines are often installed external to bridges, consideration is also being given to liaising with the Ministry of Works on the design of new bridge infrastructure to include protected utility corridors in the bridge design rather than hanging transmission lines external to the bridges. The collection of hydrometeorological data will be used to inform resilient design for the water systems. We have seen that in the case of the Girodel system, which was built back much better following Tropical Storm Erica, the cables that were used using Build Back Better techniques remained intact following Hurricane Maria. Of course, the incorporation of climate resilience into infrastructure design is a must, and consideration will be given to the application of stream bed infiltration galleries where possible in lieu of surface water abstraction systems to reduce exposure to heavy debris during flood events. A review of current locations of abstraction points or intakes will be done to identify less vulnerable locations to lessen the impact of floods, debris, and battering from main channel flows, etc. So we're going to be looking at where we abstract water from, how those systems are designed to ensure that resilience is built in those systems. We are also going to be looking at the locations, whether we continue to go upstream to get gravity flow, or whether we use lower downstream where the water is even more readily available and use pumping systems utilizing renewable energy to pump water as opposed to fossil fuels. So the design of the weir will also facilitate sediment removal, such as desedimentation structures, slope designs, or other approaches that will assist in reducing sediment buildup and promote rapid excavation after flood events. Of course, increased water storage is something that is a must going forward, and reforestation and preservation of water catchments in collaboration with the Division of Forestry is also under consideration. Finally, Dowasco is considering the possibility of groundwater abstraction in major water systems such as WA1 to help build resilience in these water systems. Of course, the issue of staffing, competent staffing through training and other development efforts will be considered, as our human resource is critical to any resilience measures that could be developed. I thank you for your attention.